everyone, and welcome to Dreamleapers with Harriet Cole. I am very excited to have someone back this week who I've known for so many years, and she's just an amazing creative talent. I'm going to tell you about her right now. She is an award-winning author of 5 novels that include Upstate, Conception, Solemn, Speaking of Summer, and her latest novel, hot off the press, Running to Fall. Running to Fall has made history as the first book published by AALBC.com, which is the nation's oldest and largest website dedicated to Black authors and their books. Her stories have been featured all over the place in some of the best publications, including Oxford American, Black Renaissance Noir, some of the big national, People, I think People magazine, she's going to tell me, and a lot of the indie press. I just love it. KALISHA Buckhanon is my guest. She worked with me just when she was coming out of graduate school, and I'm so proud of her. She's done so many things. Please join me in welcoming her now.
Hello.
Hi.
Hey.
So I remember when, you had just finished grad school. Is that right? When you came to work with me?
Yep. I just graduated that summer and I came in the fall.
You went to the New School for Creative Writing. Is that right?
Yep.
What made you choose that school? Because I've heard some great things about it.
It was actually not initially on my list. I knew I wanted to be in New York City. I was in Chicago. And I just knew for a writing career, I had skipped past New York for college, but I was like, I can't skip past it for this, because that's a part of, I think being a writer is getting in the industry and being accessible, having access to the real, published big authors. And so it was between Columbia University, which, it's Columbia, and the New School in New York and NYU. And I had only applied to NYU or the New School because I was on the train and I had seen their faculty list and I saw Sapphire. The author, and I had just read Push, like when I took the trip to New York City, got on the train, saw the faculty, and I had reread the book like 3 times. It's one of my favorite novels. And that's why I wound up applying to the New School. And so, I actually, in my application, you indicate, who you might want to work with or whatever. And so I had indicated her, not knowing they'd actually pass her my application. Like, what do you think of her? She loved it so much, she nominated me she was like, give this girl some money. So the New School actually gave me a presidential scholarship, which covered half of my tuition.
So amazing. And graduate school is not necessarily known for giving that much money, right?
Right. Now, so it was a no-brainer at that point. It was like, okay, work with somebody that I just felt like a connection to their work that I could come and work with, at a novelist, a Black woman, and then also get half of my tuition paid. So yeah. And they also, one of their other edges was their classes were at night because they respect, an MFA is a luxury really, and people have to work. So I knew that I was in that category.
So KALISHA, here on Dreamleapers, we'd like to talk to people about those dreams that get them to where they are now. When you were a little girl, did you dream of being a writer?
Yeah, I wrote all the time. I read all the time, but I lived in a very small town. Ironically, I didn't think a writer was something I could be. Thank God we had gotten the Cosby Show and some other sitcoms like Bel Air, Fresh Prince, where you started to see professional, educated Black people. And so I definitely could see that. But the books that I was given were white writers or foreign writers, I never really, I just thought, oh, this is just something that I'll, always do, but I didn't know what to do with it. And it really was discovering Toni Morrison's Bluest Eye in the library. I was about 12 or 13. And James Baldwin's Go Tell It on the Mountain, which, was about the Black church that I was into. Family was definitely into church. And, but he was in Harlem. His books were set in New York. But it was when I read Morrison, set in this small town in the Midwest with the same type of homes and the same type of conversation, colloquialisms, and name brands, things that I saw, around me, that I was like, wait a minute, maybe this thing is for me too. Mm-hmm. And once I got to college, I just kept meeting professional, real authors who had done it, people.
And so your parents, I'm curious, because look, I knew for myself when I was 12, I knew I wanted to be a writer, and I wasn't sure what it would be, but that was what my heart told me that I was going to do. And I was interested in writing and fashion, and have created a world and business around presentation style and language. So, go figure. But when I told my father that I wanted to be a writer, my father was a judge. He says, well, you have to go to law school because the best kind of writing is the law. And I was like, Daddy, for you, but I don't think that's what I want to do. He thought I was nuts that I even imagined that being a writer could be a career. What did your parents say when you were growing up and you got to the point of, maybe I really want to do this for my work?
I was always writing and winning little contests. They were always, just like, what is she doing now? It's more like, what? Okay. So I was 16, wrote a letter to the editor of our newspaper about this controversy in school with racism. And that wound up being a big thing. And our first trip to New York to come to a talk show, it was called Jane Whitney. Back in the day, I was always writing plays, putting them on in church and school. So they didn't really understand what I was doing or know what I was doing. And neither did I. And then when I got to college, it was, I tell people I'm getting an English major, and everybody be like, oh, you're going to be a teacher, which I've taught a lot. And I was just like, no. And then even I was like, well, do I go to law school? Do I go to journalism school? Because as you're saying, writer is, it's romanticized.
Yes.
It's like these kind of somewhat celebrities floating around on our shelves and in our homes, mm-hmm. but no real, we don't see the way to do it. So I just, it was actually the move to New York that made me say, I want to figure out how to do it, how to be it. So the family just kind of followed along with whatever I was doing.
It's interesting. One of the people that I've talked to you about, and I've heard you talk about in interviews, whom I love so much, is Walter Mosley. And he also was really kind to me when I had my first book, Jumping the Broom. We were part of a book fair somewhere in the middle of the country, and we were seated next to each other. So he was already a famous author.
Yeah.
This is 30 years ago, but he was already a famous author. And he was so generous and, telling me basically what you do at a book signing and how you talk to people, how you engage people, how you talk about your book. And then also at that point, because I was still working at Essence when I wrote Jumping the Broom, and he says, well, you could be a full-time author. You are an author, so you could be a full-time author. You've written a book. You're on the circuit. You can just be that right now. And it was so nice to hear this accomplished writer just give me all this confidence, that absolutely you can do it. And in my case, I don't just write, I do other things. You are a full-time writer, which is amazing to me. But, it was Walter Mosley who said it to me. Of course, if that's what you want to do, you can be full-time right now. What was the inspiration that you got from him? Because I know you talk very fondly of Walter.
Yeah. And again, like you, I was just shocked that I'm like, oh, this, because my first book, they did it up, they put it everywhere. And he had heard of it, and I was like, oh, it's amazing. Um, he talked to me about writing every day. He talks to everybody about writing every day,
Yep.
and we're not going to meet his standard, because he is the standard of that. Like,
Oh my gosh. And so incredibly prolific. Wow.
yeah, and I mean, he's still writing every day. So yeah, he definitely talked to me about writing every day, and in the chaos of publishing, which, as you know, is separate from creating, the actual industry. That was really what he impressed upon me was, well, if you're not writing all the time or every day, you're not going to be a writer for long. And he was right, because the minute I kind of, as a young amateur newbie in the business, got swept into all the worries and the pressures and the, obligations of that, the actual practice of I just sit down automatically and write started to kind of fade. So I'm still not where he would want me to be. I'm at a C, level. I want to be to the A level.
You know what the standard is, because he taught it to you. So, I totally believe that, for folks who may not want to be writers, who are tuned in, whatever you want to do, if you commit, my secret is an hour a day, every day, including the weekend. If you do that, you commit an hour a day to whatever your dream is, you will manifest something, because you have focused on it. But without that tender loving care, that focus, that commitment, it doesn't happen. And we know it. And the thing is, if you commit to an hour a day and you miss a day or two, you've still gotten in 5 days, right? But I liken it to when people talk about working out. Well, I'm going to work out twice a week, and maybe you work out twice a month. But if you say you're going to do it every day, you may get close to every day, right?
Yeah. And you have an ache for it, like when I'm not in the gym, it builds up. It's like, oh, I didn't go today, I'm gonna go tomorrow. But when I have kept that word of every day, even if I remember, I think it was, Labor Day. I went in after I went to the beach, and luckily I'm fortunate it's around the corner, but I just walked in for 30 minutes. We went in and did something, because it starts to be like an ache of, it's like getting up out of bed to brush your teeth because you didn't do that.
And what is your writing process like? What is KALISHA's writing discipline?
Against Walter's best advice, I don't do it that kind of micro building. I really kind of, when I get hit to write something, it's like a flood. It's like an outburst. It's all I do. I disappear. Everybody's like, "Are you all right?" It's like when people start coming to hunt me down, and that's what it is for me. I definitely want a more measured approach. And I do work on things in a more measured way. But in terms of when I would say all the books, stories, and even random things that I just on my mind that I haven't even published, or some that I have, it's just like a flood. And it just, like, everything stops, everything, it really becomes very all consuming, and and I love that part, actually. That's it's strange.
One of my favorite writers is David Sedaris. He, comedic writer. And in one of his books, I can't remember which one it was, but I read, like, he told a secret of his writing process that I absolutely loved. He's like, when he's out and about every day, before he goes to bed, he does a download of details of what he observed during the day, like super details. And he just takes however long. It isn't even a question of how long it is. Sometimes it's a long time, sometimes it's short, but he captures fresh memories of things that he observed during the day, and then he saves it. And that way, he said that when it comes time, oh, what is that thing that happened? he goes, because in the computer now you can file things and give it a name and figure out what you did with it, right? I loved that, Kalisha. Now, I don't do it all the time, but when I remember it, then I do that, because the vividness of a fresh memory is very different from, oh, this happened last year or last month or whatever. So I love that idea. You know, it's a really cool idea. I want to remind folks that you are here with me on Dreamleapers with Harriet Cole, and we are talking to KALISHA Buckhanon. She has written 5 novels, you guys. It's so great. I'm so proud of her. I remember when she came out of graduate school and she came to work with me and brought her wonderful spirit, and we've stayed in touch all these years, and I'm just so, so proud. So, KALISHA, thank you again for being here with us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me anytime. And even that, like, it's, because you said Walter was a famous author, but I definitely had Jumping the Broom. Like, everybody was talking about this book, like, because we all, wanted our husband and our dream wedding. And so, even, that it's like people ask you all the time, oh, well, when do you know that, you have success or that you've made it? And you really never know, because for us, we always have more goals. That's but, true. Certainly moments like this, when you look up and you find that people that you read or, knew or and wanted to model yourself after in some way, it's like, now, wow, I'm gonna be, that you know them. I'm still shocked at all the people that I actually know, that I just
one
know.
Of those people you mentioned, I don't know whether you got to know her, but you mentioned The Bluest Eye. That I read The Bluest Eye when I was in college, and it definitely changed my life. Just, the imagery, the messages. I mean, Toni Morrison's an incredible creator, writer, thinker. The way she captured our stories was just unique and moving and very detailed. And so I want to say to you, when I read your work, I think of her.
Oh, thank you.
Detail, the depth of character development. The storytelling definitely reminds me of Toni Morrison. How much of an influence would you say that she has been on your work?
Yeah. And I read The Bluest Eye in college too. When I said, as a child, found it in the library, I didn't know what I was doing with that book. Let me be clear.
You had to read that again. You had to read it again.
Yeah, I was like, let me put this one away. I get, but it was college that I finally could process it and actually read it. But, she is, I would say, out of all the writers I love, and there are many, she's probably the writer that has best captured the milieu that made me who I am, in terms of, her Sula is one of my stories of a Black woman leaving the quote unquote bottom where she comes from and all the natives and her roots, and going to the city and coming back and trying to fit into that, traditions that she's outgrown, but that's made her at the same time. Just the average, everyday kind of Black people of the Midwest that I didn't really see, and South, her characters, float no matter where they are. She captures them. I had never really seen those kind of people, and the naming, the way that she names these characters, like, it's like, Beloved and Baby Boy and Ajax, that is very big where I come from. It's like nobody has their real name. Your name is a characteristic of you. So that and a lot of the relationships and dynamics between mothers, daughters, women and men were so familiar to me. So in terms of being the biggest influence of this is, I can put this to paper, my world, it's definitely her. But then I'd say after her is, Stephen King is underestimated for what an actual great writer.
incredible writer, right?
Because his stories get so blown up into the movies and the series but if you are reading his books, you can see a writer. And so he's another one in the way that when I was young, I read a lot of him and, Carrie, these milieus and backgrounds that he captures as well. And how he
see that when you mention him and when I think of your work, the detail, again, it's the detail. You take us in all the way in. And see and be in the experience. And then there's this thing which is very different from Stephen King, more like Toni Morrison, and probably another one who I know you know and love is Terry McMillan, that you write about Black people. Right?
Yeah.
And is that your choice, and what is your approach in writing about Black people and Black culture?
Well, this new book, I did add some more diverse characters, but yeah, it's what I know best, Black women, and things have changed. When I was growing up in college, even grad school, maybe grad school is when I started to finally see, because I lived in Harlem and remember the book vendors? So it was in Harlem that I started to see there's this Black woman writing, there's this Black woman, because I wasn't seeing them in the normal outlets. It's just what I know. It's what I am. It's what I'm proud to be. I am so blessed to have such a range of Black lives and women and people that I have known. And the one thing that we all share is a bond over systemic racism and structural racism, and having to struggle harder than other people to get the same things or less. So that's what bonds us all. And so I will never run out.
Tell those stories in your books. Before we talk about the current book, let's go to your first book, Upstate, which I want you to tell us about it in case there are people who haven't read it yet, including, where are you from, KALISHA?
I am from Kankakee, Illinois. And
That's a small town, right?
Yeah. It's a small town. And I actually just saw it last night in a book. I bought Michael Mann's Heat, the film. He wrote a prequel to that. And the characters are in Chicago, and one of them just drove past Kankakee, and I've never seen it in a book. I was crying. I was like, wow, other than my own. So this little hick town or small Walmart town, Mayberry town, whatever you want to call it, farm town, factory town, like that. Yeah. Wow.
That's something else. And so you didn't know what upstate meant when you were here in New York. No. I've heard you talk about you thought upstate was the Catskills or somewhere else, some fancy place where when people
dirty dancing.
Upstate. And what does upstate mean? What does upstate mean?
Well, for us, I'm in New York now. It's where the prisons are concentrated. New York State prisons are concentrated upstate. And for us in Illinois, it was downstate. So when you said, "Oh, he went down," you know what that meant. And so, when I first got to Harlem, I meet people, New Yorkers are so friendly. And I had all these people looking out for me, and brothers would be there one day, gone the next, or just pop back up and be like, "Oh, okay, hey, how you doing?" And, they would always talk about, we've been upstate or he's upstate. So I really thought these people were going on vacation. I thought they had summer homes or winter homes or cottages. I don't know what I thought. Dirty dancing type resorts.
Right.
Then I kind of figured out from them what it really meant. And I was like, oh my gosh, wow. And so then I started looking up, all the prisons that are up there and how they've turned that area into an prison industrial complex, basically.
Which is just frightening. So what is your book Upstate about? Tell us about it.
Well, it's about a boy who disappears from Harlem, who is in high school, and he's writing his girlfriend, who is left behind. He has been convicted of a crime, or not convicted, accused of a crime in his family. And his girlfriend is his anchor to the outside world and to humanity, his humanity and love. And, there's the typical teen love, teen crush kind of action going on. And they write letters for 10 years. And so you get to see the roller coaster of their lives, where he goes, where she goes. In her life. And so.
And it was that book that got such acclaim, including, was it a Young Writers Award from Terry McMillan? What was that?
Yeah, that was the Terry McMillan Young Author Award. She just singled out this book, loved it so much. Which, once again, we're talking about, it's still amazing to me. It never gets old. And about, when you have people that you look up to, not that, and even kids in schools, I get so many messages now from still today from kids who are on the social media, Twitter, Instagram, hitting up their author. They don't write anymore, they social media. Yeah. And so, it's like, wow, I was that kid, I was and I had no way to reach the writer. I didn't even know the person was really real. You don't even think about them like that.
Especially when you get to the level like Terry McMillan. And I mean, she is one of the most down-to-earth people I have ever met. So it's really interesting when you do meet her, you're like, oh yeah, she's a writer, but she's just like that person. And
that's one thing as well that I was even starting in college, that was also comforting for me to take the leap, to throw myself out there and be a writer, which, let's face it, it's like being an athlete. It's like being a model. It's like being a singer. It's actor. These are dream jobs. But then you get this image or false image that the people are different from you, or what you read in tabloids, or, oh, they must be, difficult to work with, or even in college, when I got to organize events for people like Gwendolyn Brooks and Sonia Sanchez, and I just kept finding Derek Walcott, I just kept finding these are actually some of the most personable, humble people that I'm meeting in the world.
And you learn from. I remember this is a wonderful thing. I've been in Sonia Sanchez's company many times over the years. And something that I heard her say a while ago that I work hard to implement. She was speaking at a women's conference, and I think I was speaking there too. And I went to listen to her, and someone, I guess, who introduced her said, "Oh, hey guys, I just want to say now we're about to hear from Sonia Sanchez." She comes on stage and says, "Thank you very much." And the first thing I have to say is, don't call us guys. Where are the guys? This was a women's conference. And she's like, let us empower ourselves with language. When you are in the company of a group of women, find language that says who's in front of you. Find language that is inclusive of who's in front of you. Do not diminish who you are by saying guys, because guys means men. There's nothing wrong with men. If they're men, they're great. But this was a group of only women. Yeah. I loved it. She's like, come on, use empowering language. I mean, she's just incredible. And these people like you, I saw an interview that you did with our mutual friend, Clarence Waldron. And thank
you for watching that.
Yeah. Oh, it's so good. And he was asking you about education and the importance of education. And you talked about these writers. Could you tell us a little bit more about what you think is the importance of education and how it has impacted your life?
It's just a great equalizer. And I get asked about influences all the time. And I don't forget my teachers, but, they're not necessarily the top of mind all the time. But we wouldn't be talking now if it had not been for teachers who recognized talent and skills that they weren't necessarily teaching, but
Right.
that they saw as valuable. Education is an equalizer. We've seen, so, I mean, how many people do we know who came from certain backgrounds? I came from a background of fairly, most people were not formally educated or higher educated. And I think Kamala Harris just put up a post about going on a college tour starting in Hampton, and she put her college graduation picture, and she said, it opens your mind, it makes you dream. Going to college gets you to dream bigger than you ever have, because where we come from is where we get our initial repository of what life is and what it should be and what we should be. And some of us, if we're lucky, we have people who support alternatives, but it's still a fixed reality. And then once you get out into college, where you are in this hodgepodge of people from countless, infinite fixed realities, yet you are all in the same place with the relatively same goals, that is at the point at which you start to dream, these big things that show you could get past whatever your fixed reality is and still mesh with other people in whatever your new reality is. And so,
there's a book that came out earlier this year that I'm thinking of as you're saying this. Deborah Roberts, the newscaster.
Yeah, I saw you interviewed her. Yeah.
A book called Lessons Learned and Cherished: The Teacher Who Changed My Life. And she has her own stories, her husband's stories, and many other people, known and unknown, who tell about a teacher who was everything to them. If it hadn't been for whatever that teacher is, whoever that person is, they might not be the person they are today, which is kind of what you're saying. And I just love amplifying the people who teach us, because they don't get enough of it. And I love the fact that you teach. I also teach. It's important. You have knowledge, you have wisdom. It's so important to be able to share that. Okay, KALISHA, I want to talk about the new book.
Thank you.
Book number 5.
Yes.
And this is something, I often ask people, what did you do during COVID? Because everybody has something, that was part of their life, their world. You're going to remember, because it was such a pivotal time. You wrote a book.
I did.
I published a book. So tell us about how this book came to be. How did it come into your imagination that it would be this story, and how you used your time to create it?
Yes. Well, I was very fortunate because my 4th book came out right before COVID, the 2019. So I had been, for that whole year. As a matter of fact, the last time I was in New York when we did the interview, it was right before, I didn't come back for a couple of years. And so all the things that the paperback was launching the next year. So I was fortunate people were inside reading more, thank God, although for unfortunate reasons. So I was fortunate to have had a lot of momentum still from that last book, that I didn't have any pressure to panic about, oh my God, what, some people release books during COVID, including Terry. She released her last book during COVID and canceled everything. And, so I did a lot of resting. I did a lot of talking on the phone, which I'm always have been a fan of. I did a lot of, writing to people, sending old-fashioned things that we had forgotten about. I didn't necessarily leap into the online world. And then, but one thing I did too much of, I was drinking, and not on a level of concern or illness or, alcoholism, but just on a level of socializing at home, or suddenly making home fun in these ways that I discovered a lot of people were doing, you know, where we just talk on the phone. Yeah, I have my bottle of wine. Or, you know, when we did start to venture to gather a little bit more, people, you know, get together. We couldn't go out. We couldn't go to restaurants. We couldn't go to bars. And so I just had started to notice this common thread among people of, you know, wait a minute, my actual drinking uptake has gone up at a time that I'm not exercising as much, right? We were all inside. There's something wrong with this equation. So that's kind of how I started to even think about my characters are all me in some way, but they're always these more dramatic, heightened versions of me because I'm probably as straight as an arrow and boring. But so, yeah, that's where this, you know, Black woman alcoholic came into my mind, which I had seen a few books portray us with movies and stuff, but, you know, not as a real character. And so, yeah, from there, it just was the missing woman idea that was going on again. I felt like I left that unfinished in my last novel. And a tragedy story just kind of, you know, bloomed from there. But the genesis of writing the essence of her particular character as this Black woman who is struggling with a hidden alcoholism problem, self-medicating a lot of her issues, and then kind of getting herself mixed up in something that she can't get out of, was really like during the pandemic. And just, you know
what's so interesting, KALISHA? People talked about, well, churches were closed, but liquor stores were not closed.
Yeah, right. That was it. Yeah.
And I remember talking to, there's a really nice wine store around the corner from where I live. And like towards the end of the pandemic, I asked what was the difference between, you know, the height of the pandemic and now in terms of what people were buying. And so they said it was so busy during the pandemic that their business shot up, and it shot up with dark liquor, you know, brown liquor as opposed to wine. There was some wine consumption, but the liquor consumption was through the roof. And the manager said to me that this was probably at the beginning of this year that I asked that question. And he said that he could tell that people were getting healthier when they went back to more wine and less hard liquor.
Yes. Oh yeah, like you said, the churches were closed, but liquor stores were open.
They were.
You know, bookstores were closed, shops were closed. Everybody order online. Well, you can't order the liquor online. You can, but
you can now. I don't know whether you could at the beginning of the pandemic.
they worked that out.
They figured that out. But what I think those people who are writers or interested in writing, hearing how you come to create a character, you're paying attention to what's going on in your world, right?
Definitely.
You're paying attention. And how have people responded to this book?
Yeah, I've gotten so many, you know, because it's about more than that. And, you know, there's, she has a foster care history. She has, you know, a marriage, which is one of those online. Her husband is a producer of a big podcast show, and a professor, a speaker, a commentator. He's that guy, so to speak. He's like a female hero. He does everything. Everybody knows him, and you know, she's like his background manager. And their relationship, you know, is not what it seems. You know, there's foster care. So I've gotten there's the Black couple living in an all white area that I invented. This is the first time in my career that I invented a place, just because there was nothing that fit. It was either these wonderful enclaves of Black professionals that are already well known and already famous, or the areas that don't want us. And so I put them in an area that didn't want us, but that was fictitious. So I've gotten so many responses from people on all fronts, but the common thread, of course, is that I'm dealing with, you know, social justice as always, capturing a complex Black woman, and I go back to her childhood, so Black girlhood as well. And a lot of thanks for tackling like the foster care system, and not a great depth, but that's a part of her life and a part of her background that she's hiding. So,
and so KALISHA, in terms of your process, because you're writing fiction, but I know from talking to other novelists, there's a lot of research that often goes into fiction writing to make sure that, like, for example, with the foster care system, that you really understand it and you get facts correct. And if there's a community, like you made up one, but usually you don't, how much research do you typically do to ensure that your storytelling is robust with facts?
One of the benefits of writing plays, I don't do fantasy. I really admire those people, the side world builders who just come up with a place that they from scratch. I'm definitely more, Stephen King. You can, if it's in Maine, you're reading Stephen King, or, the South, John Grisham, Toni Morrison did her, Terry's in Arizona, Michigan, so I favor sticking to the places that I know, just for that flat line of, okay, I can go now with the characters in the story. And I research as I go along. When I get to something that I want to portray that I don't know about, or I've never been, or it's just something that I saw briefly, then that's kind of when I dig a little bit deeper into. So for instance, with Upstate, I always got that question, is what research, which people were really trying to scout out. Did you really have a lover in prison? Did you
Right.
And I was just like, no, but for that, we all know the basics of prison life and how families are affected by it, the people who are left behind and the conditions. But definitely there were more nuanced things that needed to be verified, and procedures and processes covered, dealing even with the legalities of his case. So at that point I'll research, but in the beginning, as I said, because I don't do the historical fiction, which is not to say one day I won't, or fantasy fiction, I kind of start from what I know, and then from there bruise on. And, I do get stopped by things that I need to make sure I know what I'm talking about. And like, so how much was that, like, tequila, that famous tequila, that her husband's drinking? I have to stop myself, because I don't drink tequila. So I have to stop myself and find those things out, or,
so it's in the moment that you're doing.
Yeah, very in the moment, making notes of what I know that I need to go and pep up and decorate a lot more, just get it out initially, but then go back and make it actually real, so I can be checked on it. Yeah, checked on it.
Let me remind folks, this is Dreamleapers with Harriet Cole. I'm so excited to have KALISHA Buckhanon, 5-time novelist, 5 times. She is a writer, a speaker, a teacher, a commentator, and her book Running to Fall just came out this year. And she's so excited to share this book with me, as I am to share with you, and to really talk about her process as a writer. Because KALISHA, if there's one thing that most people will tell me, it is that they want to be a writer. Most people want to, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, so people want to get their stories out. And let me ask you, are you a full-time writer now? Is that how you spend your time?
Yeah, I mean, I've done a lot of teaching, but I'm here and I definitely have something to finish. So what I tend to do is disappear and replenish, and I have been fortunate to also be a part of the traditional publishing system, which I highly always recommend. I never realized how many people wanted to be writers until I actually got published. Initially, nobody I knew. It was a very lonely thing, but you're right. Now it's everybody I meet wants to be a writer. And so because I did, meet the people I needed to meet, take the steps I needed to take, find the agents I needed to find, get into the traditional publishing system that will, I won't say you can make a full living off of it unless you are in some of these brackets of people we've mentioned, but, you are well compensated for your time to write. And so, so I'm just right now trying to finish something new. It's very, 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 and this is necessary for me. It's very, very difficult for me to work when I have other obligations. So I can do it, but it's very hard. So I tend to segment when I'm teaching away from the time that when I'm writing. But right now it's essentially, and I do teach online for some various organizations who offer writing workshops and, writing help and things like that, creative writing work. But essentially writing and managing these careers. That's the other part people don't understand. That's a job. You're not just writing. You're not just sitting there writing a book. There's so many corners of this that have to be managed, from learning how to keep up with your sales and royalties, visiting bookstores, developing relationships with bookstores and literary organizations. We have social media now. Can you believe, like 20 years ago, there was none of that. And
20 years ago, there were a whole lot more bookstores. I mean, it's really interesting now for the book industry. I think, as you mentioned, with COVID, a lot of people started to read. They were watching TV too. Binge watching became a thing, but also people began to read more. And that is so good for so many reasons. But the book publishing industry definitely was hurt by many independent bookstores going out of business, the big giant bookstores taking over, and then cable TV. And there are fewer people turning a page.
Yes.
What do you think about what's happened? What do you think about what's happened with the book industry?
I'm an optimist. I don't think we have had stories in some form, even if they were people writing chapters of the Bible or hieroglyphics for centuries. Since the start of humanity, we've had stories, and we will always have stories. Stories have predated cable TV. They predate the radio age. They predate the film age. Books and stories are here. Now, formats are changing, so the formats that we have to be, I think, more adaptable and open to seeing a book. This is my heart, this book, this thing that I could hold and carry, and you have memories with it of, when you read it and when you finished it and where you were and all of that. But we have to, there's a lot going on with books now. Audiobooks are huge.
That's true.
Because they're being carried along by the podcast boom. People are listening. They got tired of being stuck watching and immobile, so they started moving around to listen. And so audiobooks are huge. Walter talks about reading his work back to himself to see how it sounds. Yes. That's a great note that I even started was, well, if I can't read this to an audience, or an actress can't read this for audio, if it's hard for them to read, then it's going to be hard for it to listen to. So, I definitely think in terms of the traditional print book, I don't think it's ever going anywhere. I
love that you say that. And I want to say I agree with you on that as well. Tell me about the company that published Running to Fall.
Yeah, so African American Literary Book Club, and this is, thank you for mentioning that, because this is one of the things that, when you talk about the book industry changing, is a 25-year website that was founded by an individual named Troy Johnson, who lived in Harlem at the time, and just started selling books, Black books, specifically Black books, before Amazon, I believe, or during that time. And from there, it kind of grew from just a book place where you sold books to a place where you could actually find writers. He was cataloging various writers along with their books. So I remember when I was in college, I started looking at the site because it was like an encyclopedia of Black writer bios. And so I was like, I want a page on that site. And I got that eventually. But yeah, ALBC now is, it's a chat, in addition to being a bookseller, it's a chat forum. It also provides, marketing services, a newsletter that goes out to, I don't even know how many people at this point. So yeah, so essentially he started a publishing company. If you could ever see a website, which Amazon has done, they are a website that publishes. Yeah, bookshop.org has recently started publishing. So these are, websites that just decided to enter the publishing space. And that's basically what Troy and I decided to do with this work was, rather than self-publishing, we know, traditional publishing, we know, how about just a new publishing venture with a web enterprise, a Black, web enterprise, Black owned, Black.
What makes it different from self-publishing?
Well, again, I'm great at large details in a novel. I'm not the best at details.
I was just curious. I mean, I think it's a great idea, and the fact that they have an audience already is incredible. I think sometimes in the self-publishing space,
yeah,
you could just be lost. It's the wild, wild west of being online. But with an organization with 25 years of history, it's an established site, an established point of light and point of reference. So yeah. I just love that you made that choice, because today there's so many choices and you have to figure it out. And the fact that there isn't just one is really something. So can you tell us what you're working on now? Can you talk about the next book?
Something just came to me that I think it's going to work. Something really just came to me. I don't want to give too much away, because then if I don't do it, but let's just say it involves this world that we're now in, where people are connecting on Zoom. It's not a mystery, not a thriller. I'm definitely thinking more of just a girlfriend type story and narrative regarding what we'll say are epic Zoom calls, which we're all having these days with whether it's with family, with friends, people's weddings. We've gotten used to this format that used to look very futuristic back in the day, or was only accessible to the wealthy. I remember you had a BlackBerry, and I was just like, oh, there's a BlackBerry, because that was just a business. It's like, oh, you have to really, really be doing business to have a BlackBerry, so I just had a little cell phone back then. So we are just moving at the speed of light.
We are. We really, really
think so. That's really kind of what I think. I have been writing something, but as a lot of times I'm just writing, but I don't know, there's no punch to it.
Do you give yourself a timeline? Like, I have to jump on a new book as soon as I finish the previous one, I have to finish it in a certain amount of time. What are those parameters that are in your mind in your planning?
In my dreams, Harriet, I would love to do that. That's the next dream, is I'll just slide, get my Danielle Steele on, just slide right into the next, as she says. I don't see how she doesn't. Yeah, I need downtime. I really, yeah.
Well, we are so proud of you. Congratulations on novel number 5. I highly recommend that people read your work. It's rich. The storytelling is rich, and so you really want to take time and experience all of the scenes and the pictures that you paint, which is, I mean, the best thing about writing is when you can see it, when you can enter into the experience, it's just beautiful. And you do this so well. So congratulations on Running to Fall and all of your other books. And we can't wait to see what's coming up next. But for now, Running to Fall is available. It came out this year. You definitely should pick up a copy right away. Thank you, Kalisha.
Thank you, Harriet, and all you Dreamleapers. Go for it.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to Dreamleapers. Get that book, Running to Fall, KALISHA Buckhanon. Get it right now. It is absolutely a great read. You're going to love it. Until next time, have a great day and make it count.